Okay, coming up with our next speaker. I was just outside and my friend Ray Mendez was on his phone and I heard him say, Siri, could you call my house? And I don't use that. I tried it once. I said, Siri, why do I have problems with women? And it said, this is Alexis. Our next speaker is Kern Collymore. Kern Collymore. Kern will share his experience building the Solar Hogan Earthship, cost to date, as well as how they have reduced costs, passive solar heating, water catchment, etc. Most recently, Kern has been working with local communities and the University of Arizona to design and build solar-powered water filtration systems for rural household drinking from unregulated sources, as well as facilitating sustainable housing workshops, building his Solar Hogan. Please welcome Kern Collymore.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kern Collymore, as that was just mentioned. I'm from an island in the Caribbean called Trinidad and Tobago. I grew up in New York City, and after graduating from college, I moved back to the Navajo Reservation with my partner. I went to like a fancy Ivy League university, and I used to think I knew a lot. And I moved to the reservation, and I got stuck in the mud one day. And I realized how little I knew. So I used to teach at the school, and I, taught these kids. I taught 8th grade language arts. And as I was walking back from my truck being stuck to the house to get a shovel to dig myself out, I walked by the house of some of these kids. And these kids are like the rabble-rousers in school. They don't listen. They don't do their work, right? The ones who I've already labeled. Just got stuck. I got to walk home. Like, oh, we'll help you. And walk back to my truck. And in that, and these kids could take apart an engine block blindfolded, 13, 14 years old. And I had just, who was taught that I was going to go out and make a difference. I started to realize how much I didn't know. So, sustainable housing. We moved back to in the first place, trying to build a daycare center. And if you know anything about reservation living, there's a lot of red tape. So we started researching different forms of sustainable building. There's Earthships, there's straw bale houses. This here is a design that was created by a Navajo man back in 1989 called the Solar Hogan. So it's supposed to mimic the traditional Navajo Hogan, which is their traditional style of housing, but supposed to be a contemporary thing for young people moving back to the reservation back in '89, right? So it would have the Solar Hogan. Again, us living on the Navajo Nation, a lot of this was focused on housing is yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if the wider world knows, but housing is a huge problem on the reservation. Because a lot of land is held in trust by the U.S. government, just building someplace is a big process. You have to go through grazing permittee holders have to sign off on your allotment on where you're building. You have to go through cultural preservation things. It's a bigger issue than is being addressed right now. So, this is just talking about the different ways housing has been affecting communities. So this presentation I had put together for the ETA, the Energy Transfer Act, and the creation of getting young people to work on building solar or sustainable housing across the reservation. So, we have people who have been working on straw bale houses, one of the things that we haven't started yet, but people are looking into is container housings. And these are just, again, different types of sustainable housing techniques. And then, there's just the different benefits of the sustainable housing. So we ourselves, we're doing an Earthship, which is one of the techniques that we're using to actively take more waste out of the environment. So we have collected over 600 tires within a 10-mile radius of our build site. It's to the point where if you go to a tire store, so Gallup is our closest town, there are some places where they'll pay you to get rid of their tires. And it's funny, I was talking to some people from the cities, and cities, they have it kind of out of sight, out of mind, but pretty much anywhere where there are tire stores, you'll go there and you'll see these huge things. So once people started hearing that we were building this house out of tires, which in and of itself is this crazy thing. Yeah, you know, I had people think like, oh yeah, you're that guy that's gonna live in that hole in the ground in tires, right? And like, no, not really. My father-in-law like thought I was the craziest person ever, right? Again, it's like person who came back from college and now he's gonna build a house out of tires, like in the dirt. But once people heard that we were collecting tires, they would come and just drop stuff off at the house. So as I mentioned before, our system is trying to be more in line, culturally sensitive to like Navajo people. That's where I live. That's where I guess like an in-law into. And the Navajos, as I said before, have this style of housing called the Hogan, which is I guess it's like a one-room house with a stove in the center with an east-facing door. It's like that, like their cultural norm. So this house that we've been working on, we've been designing, falls in line with that, but again, in this contemporary way. So you have the Hogan in the middle. And then as you can see, it's like a larger Hogan around it. So on the south-facing side, we have the greenhouse. And then on the north are these rooms. So these two rooms here that we have so far, it's like connected, it's open, and then this is one room by itself, and then this is a smaller room. This here becomes a bathroom, and then this here is like a kitchen, and then a little like living area. This is a model that was built at the University of Boulder, Denver back in 1989. Again, a part of that Charles Cambridge design, the Solar Hogan. It was bulldozed to make a parking lot about 3 years ago. Yeah, progress. But you know, I have this in here as a slide. Just, you know, trash has been a big issue in places that don't have municipal, you know, waste systems. The Navajo Nation is a place where that happens. We have a lot of things called the illegal trash dumps. As I mentioned before, these Earthship houses use a lot of these materials. So glass bottles, you can find them, plethora of them anywhere. Plastics. You know, this is stuff that we've collected up and we've had around the area, but also we've found in illegal trash dumps. It's funny because you use the glass bottle bricks to kind of fill in space in different places, but I've had like different friends and they'll like come in with a 6-pack of like empty bottles and like, you know, I did it for the wall this weekend. I'm like, yeah, thanks. Every now and then people just be like, for the wall, you know, just as more just excuses to have glass bottles to help with the project. But, you know, I mentioned about different ways we can start like reducing costs and as we're doing these projects. I think one of the things that we've been able to do has been like reaching out and working with different groups in the area. So a lot of us have like workforce development for like the counties or for the regions. A lot of times like they're looking for projects to get people onto. Right. So there's things like a TANF or like the Department of Self-Reliance, again, or even workforce development. And if you live in a big city, sure, like the sky's the limit, you can go anywhere. But if you live in a small town or small counties, there aren't a lot of options sometimes. So if you're building an Earthship and you have someone who, you know, I heard the couple before me mention like someone who's really good and is able to like be there and oversee the process, you can start getting workforce development people in there sometimes. Right. And they get paid by the hours of work that they're putting in. And then you get a worker, right? Another way that works is in collaborating with the schools and universities, right? A lot of times these academic people want these hands-on projects. They want to like see these things like in play for real. So at whatever stage you're at, right? If you're at the beginning stage, again, I've done this for quite a while. But if you're at the beginning stage, people want to see that. You know, if you're at the middle stage, people want to see that. If you're only working on solar, if you're only working on rammed earth, those are all things that are interested to certain folks. And with that being said, in terms of what's interested to in terms of what's interesting to certain folks, documenting. You know, I'm giving you this advice. I haven't necessarily taken it myself, but just something to think about as you're moving forward. If you're doing these builds, document it. And yeah, you know, like 100 people might not watch it, right? But someone will, and you have no idea who you'll catch on to, like you'll be helping. But also, it's like really informative. There isn't a lot of info on sustainable building on like YouTube and things like that. And sometimes different folks have different like personalities and personas, and social media like eats that stuff up. I am terrible at it. The majority of my pictures, like you'll see, I am not in them because I'm usually taking them or forgetting to take pictures the entire thing anyway. But you'll see, again, there's lots of different faces. There are lots of different people across social medias, and they find their their niche. You know, like there's like single women, there's like patriots, there's like gardening folks. Like, and if you're doing these things, like there are people who are going to want to see it. And I say that in terms of also when I talked about lessening costs, one of the big things is when groups come out, sometimes you have them pay for stuff. So I just had a group from Princeton come out in early March, and part of them coming out is that they gave us $3,000 towards, you know, a Home Depot list. And those are the type of things, you know, when you invite out the high schools, they have these things in their budget, right? They have things in their budgets for field trips. And if you're talking about reducing the cost of materials, like those are the kind of things that you can do, right? Have like the high school, you know, we had a high school come out and they like did the whole lunch. And then they also gave us like a stipend for the people who were like overseeing workshops. And those are the things that you could do. I mean, I've seen, again, the Earthship stuff, the real stuff where people are like charging like crazy money to attend these workshops, and you're paying these people to go and work for them. And then like, you're kind of like having to provide your own food and stuff too. And that's, I'm not talking down on that. If you're able to do that, like, again, y'all, like people are doing it out there. I think that, again, a big part of that is like how you're able to like sell yourself, the personality that like you, right? Like, nurture and maintain, and then the continuation of like continuing to like work in like the community, finding good people. We've been doing this project ourselves. I heard the couple before talk about hiring a contractor to come in, and honestly, I think irregardless of whichever way you go, it's really good to talk to the people who are doing the projects. Because as they mentioned, sometimes like you're just so stuck doing it this way because that's how you were taught, and this is the way I was taught, and this is the way we're going to move forward. That when someone who's never done it before says like, "Oh well, why are we using this? It's more expensive. Can't we just do this?" And it's just like, "Oh wow, well I've always done this, but you're right. Technically, we can do this." And you know, that's just a small example I have. One of the biggest things about Earthships, the cost, right? Because as I mentioned before, a lot of the materials, besides the cement and rebar, a lot of the materials are reclaimed materials. They're tires, they're glass bottles, they're trash, they're aluminum cans. And one of the biggest costs for Earthships is the insulation around the back, right? Because Earthships, what they are is tires pounded with earth. And the tires soak up the heat in the daytime when the air is warmer than the tires, that they soak up that heat. And then at nighttime, when that air temperature is cool and the tires are still warm, kind of like when you go for a hike and you lay on the rocks, right? And you feel like the heat radiating from the rocks, just like that. Those tires release the warm air back into your house. And that is generally the foundation of passive solar heating. So I'm using tires, people use straw bale, people use like earth bags, right? As long as you have some mass that's able to grab that heat and hold on to it. So the important part about the Earthships is that instead of having that heat just release back into the wall, you have a insulation barrier, and the heat stays in there. So one of the biggest costs for Earthships is insulation. As you all know, the styrofoam, the padded insulation is extremely expensive. So one of the things that we did was just like realizing at the end of the day, what we were creating was an air barrier. And you can use anything for an air barrier. And I have 500 tires in a big pile right here. And a whole bunch of like empty bottles, water bottles, a lot of water bottles. One of the high schools that we collaborated with had been collecting water bottles for years. So they had bottles like empty. So what we did was we put cardboard on one end of the tires, stuffed them filled with bottles, and put cardboard on the end, and then got them down into the wall. So from there, again, a lot of people talk about Earthships. I mean, again, that's a system that we use. Talk about off-gassing and leaching, right, in terms of the dangers of tires. And tires that are exposed to oxygen and the sun is definitely something you have to be concerned about. Earthship tires, just in their design, they are neither of those things. They're buried. I'm sorry, y'all. I've been talking and not like going through the pictures, but I have pictures. They're buried in the ground, right? And then they're stuccoed over in the front. So you never see the tires by the time the project is over. So just in terms of creativity and the different things that we've been trying, we're going to try to do a aircrete roof with this project. And then, yeah, so what I was going to say as well is that as you're doing these projects, as you're doing these things, like, you know, things don't go as you're planned. Things don't go as you planned. And I have this here because this is after we had finished building the entire wall. We had started digging out to build our retaining wall, and it rained 2 nights in a row. And this is like, I live in the desert, y'all. It doesn't rain. It rained 2 nights in a row, and then we realized where we had dug out, it must have been back in the day an old riverbed, because right where we were was extremely sandy. So after doing, again, everything was done, we were just building the retaining wall. It rained for 2 nights, and this entire wall collapsed. The entire corner of our wall collapsed. As I keep on saying, things don't go as you plan. But as long as like you're keeping on, it's like a big part of it. As I mentioned earlier, using a lot of reclaimed materials. These are the tires getting built out. You start to fill in the space until you keep on going, and eventually the tires get buried in the wall. And then this is, seeing yourself up close is really jarring. But this is like, you know, some of the groups that we had out right here. This is the group from the University of the School of Mines in New Mexico and Fort Lewis College. You know, this is just, again, like some of the people who end up coming out to the Earthship workshops. This is like an example of the flyers that we've made in the past, advertising them. You know, you send them out to people, send them out to schools, send them out to friends. You know, you have places where, you know, for us in Gallup, the dispensaries, actually, you know, I've had friends come into town and they'll stop off at the dispensary, and the dispensary will go, what are you doing here? And then they'll say, oh, I'm building an Earthship. And like, that's really cool. A lot of our people here would love to know about that. And they ask for flyers and things like that. I don't know. Just an example of different places and you can go to start putting these up. And then last but not least, this is just our like adventure that we've been having. It's called the Solar Hogan Earthship on Facebook. And then on Instagram, it's the Trini Cowboy. We're having another workshop mid-September to mid-October, where we're going to be continuing to put up our roof, where we are trying to do a cement and aircrete roof. And yeah, if y'all have any questions, I didn't go into any details of Earthship construction because I didn't think that this should be a presentation for that. But if y'all have any questions, any comments, any concerns, I'd be more than happy to hear them. Cool. Yeah, we're still building. So we're at the point now where we're trying to get ready to put a roof on. So the reason why I've been doing these workshops, and again, I heard them mention COVID. We started our workshops in 2019, and I used to work with a couple of like church groups and like youth work. So they come out for the summertime, like different kids from across the country, and we do gardening projects. And then we started the housing project in 2019, thinking that we'd have these summer kids for the rest of whatever. But yeah, COVID hit and everything got canceled. And then realizing how much pounding tires by yourself is a lot of work. So I started doing these workshops about 2 times a year. They're open to anyone. I think workshops are a great idea for people who are interested. You just have to think about where people will use the bathroom. water, and then potentially feeding them, right? I think, again, people come through and they learn these skills because you're helping them as well, all right? Like you're helping people, again, like learn skills in different areas. But then there's also this sense of people having knowledge like their own, being able to go back and do like their own. So as I mentioned before, we're trying to finish up our roof, and then the roof allows us to like work all the time. Right now, without a roof, you do a bunch of like cob or cement, and then it rains 3 months later and it washes it all off, and you have to do it all over again, right? So when you don't have a roof, a cap on the house yet, you have to really think about weatherization and those type of things. So we're really like working hard to like, get to this roof. And as I just said that we've been having these workshops. So we've had initially 2-week workshops. So two-week workshops a year. It started in 2019. So it's 2024 now. And I feel like, oh my goodness, I just want this thing to be over. But when you look at the time of these actual workshops, it's only been about 6 months, right? If I did this every single day for this length of time, it's only been about 5.5, 6 months. But I've been like spacing them out every 6 months. And to me, it's just, it takes forever. But my saying to people is just, I'm further than I was yesterday, but not as far as I want to be, and it's always going to be that way. Like you're never going to be as far as you want to be, but again, like you're further than you were.
Just a question. I've been listening to a lot of the earth structures and what you're doing, which is great. And I spent a bunch of time in Gabon in Africa, and they've got this down to a key. Not only building in the rain, but building with beer bottles so the termites don't come up into your house. Has your group looked at this kind of architecture in other parts of the world?
Yeah, yes and no. So in terms of our construction, no. But in terms of like looking at what's being done across the world, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think that in America right now, just looking at, depending on, so yeah, you might not believe that things are going to get hotter or colder or stuff, but at the end of the day, I go to Home Depot and wood cost a whole lot more than it did like 2 years ago. Right. And if we're going to keep on talking, right, like cement, like costs like a lot more than it used to. Like I said, people at certain points, like people like the tire store gave me like $1 per tire. And it was like towards the end of the bill. So I only got like $20 out of it. But, if people are going to start giving me money to like do this thing, I feel like just in terms of the construction side, but also as I keep on saying, it's also like labor is real and labor costs. So we have to like start figuring out ways of either like subsidizing labor or creating like labor forces or like workshops off of this. And for me, it wasn't that hard. Again, I live on the reservation. Unemployment is extremely high. So I had a couple of friends. It was 4 brothers, ages 18 to 27, and then their 3 cousins, ages 19 to like 30. Right. So it was 8 of us. And if I had 8 people for 6 months working on this project, I would have been done by now. And I'm sure lots of us, I mean, I don't know anyone's like situation, but I know that if I went back home, I can find a good 4 or 5 people who are like unemployed sitting around that I could potentially get to work on the project. As I mentioned before, though, it's like paying for that labor. And that's why I mentioned things like workforce development, because they will pay the cost of people being on like learning things from you. Woofing. I don't know if y'all like have looked into like those like woofer organizations where you can sign up. I don't want to go over my time, but there's like woofing organizations you could sign up for. There are different organizations where people who are traveling the country will come over and like will do work, sweat equity. They'll work and they either get to stay there. Some people like feed them. They get to park up their RVs there. And those are things that happen as well. I mean, obviously, with everyone, bringing new people into your place, I think it's really good that you all have guidelines set like first, right? Like as people come in, just because like, I don't know, the world is crazy and people are crazy. And when you start like inviting people and places and things in, just like, again, like having a system down ahead of time is much better than figuring things out as it's going. So, people who are thinking about like inviting in the schools or inviting in like workforce development or inviting in colleges, that's all great, but just make sure that you know like what you're trying to get. Yeah, just like having like your checks, like your P's and Q's like crossed and like in place before, you know, opening yourself up to like a whole lot of like chaos, right? Because like if there's like chaotic things going on and like you're chaotic, it's gonna get chaotic. But if you knew like what is going on, like, all right, I'm sorry. This isn't therapy. I would, so like honestly, our biggest cost so far has been like, as I mentioned before, like cement and rebar. You know, the logs we got them from like the Navajo Nation. You know, I don't know if you saw the pictures of the Hogan, but we got all of our logs from the Navajo Nation. So, you know, like this whole process here, but yeah, maybe like 20,000. Yeah. Yeah. And then again, like the vast majority of what I've spent has been on like doing stipends for people, or like where I have like this one homie who's been with me through the very beginning. His name's Lane, and he's like a local person. And whenever the workshops come up, he just like comes through to them and stays for the entire time. But you know, I try to give him like $80 a day, right? But then if you're doing that for 30 days, that adds up. And then if you have like 4 people that you're going to do like $80 a day or $100 a day, and that's where like a big thing happens too, like grant like writing. If you're doing alternative building, a lot of times like there are different grants you could start looking into. One of the grants that I was able to procure was this like Justice Outside grant, right? And it was for like the outdoors. And the way that I like finagled it was that me taking tires from illegal trash dumps is making the outdoors better. All right. So I was able to get a grant like through that way. And there's like different things you can do, right? You can, again, like you can look for like labor grants, right? You can look for like recycling grants, waste management grants, just depending again on the different type of like housing that you're going to be doing. Again, and you can always look for workforce development grants. Cool. And a lot of times, you know, if you're looking for grants, you have to find a fiscal agent. If there's like a local community 501c3, they usually like take an 8% fiscal agent fee. And then, yeah, you can usually do whatever you said that you're going to write your grant for, and have those type of people like oversee your money. Because a lot of times as regular people, you can't just like get a grant. But if you write a grant and you have a fiscal sponsor, which is any 501c3, they get a fee to like overlook at your money, but then as a regular person, you're able to get a grant. Cool. Yeah. Thank you all.
I didn't mean to rush your.